Everyone came to watch a billionaire change the world. No one expected to see his life fall apart instead. The winter night over Manhattan felt electric as thousands pressed into Rockefeller Center, their breath turning into white mist beneath the bright floodlights. Screens the size of buildings glowed with a countdown for the long-awaited launch of Orion Nova, the invention the media promised would reshape global communication. Above the crowd, a banner rippled in the cold air with the name Elias Mercer displayed in clean silver letters, a name that had become a symbol of ambition and impossible dreams. Camera cranes swept across the plaza, catching flashes of excited faces and glittering confetti, but the lens kept returning to one man standing alone at the center stage. Elias lifted his chin, and for the first time in years, his hand trembled around the microphone. No one noticed at first. No one expected a man known for precision and control to falter. He inhaled slowly, but the breath snagged in his chest. He scanned the sea of lights, and then his gaze stopped at one spot near the front, where Harper Quinn stood, frozen in a navy dress that fluttered with every gust of wind. She looked like she had stumbled into the wrong story. Her cheeks were flushed from cold and fear, and her hands were clasped so tightly that her knuckles showed pale beneath the thin skin. Her eyes locked with his, and the world shrank until the noise around them dissolved. She wanted to run. Her pulse hammered hard enough for her to hear it in her ears. The bright stage lights burned into her, and she felt each camera like a sharp edge, tracing her every expression. This was never supposed to happen. She had begged him just last night to talk somewhere private. She was not made for crowds or for headlines or for the crushing pressure that came with being near someone like Elias Mercer. Behind her, the villain of the night watched with quiet calculation. Ava Thorne stood at the side rail, wrapped in a white coat, and holding a tablet that reflected each moment with perfect clarity. Her eyes followed Elias with something too sharp to be admiration. She looked like a woman preparing for a storm and making sure she was the one holding the lightning rod. Elias stepped toward Harper. The crowd roared at the movement. They believed this was simply another grand moment from a man famous for spectacle. They did not see the fear in his eyes or the grief that flickered beneath the confidence he wore like a tailored suit. The music dipped low. Spotlights converged. The countdown halted on the final number, as if even the technology sensed something more important was about to begin. Elias reached into his pocket, and the crowd surged forward. Phones lifted. Reporters leaned over railings. Security tensed. Harper's breath came out in short, uneven bursts as she realized what he was about to do. Her vision blurred for a second, and she felt the ground tilt under her boots. She shook her head, the smallest warning, but he did not see it. He was already lost in the moment he had planned for weeks. The moment he believed would rewrite the loneliness carved into his life. He lowered himself onto one knee. A wave of sound tore through the plaza as thousands screamed with surprise and delight. Some cried, some shouted his name, others shouted hers. Harper did not move. She could not. Her limbs felt heavy as stone. Her heart thrashed like a trapped thing against her ribs. Elias opened the ring box, and its diamond caught the light with a bright, unsteady shimmer. His voice came out softer than anyone expected. "Harper Quinn, will you marry me?" The entire plaza stilled. A hush rolled through the cold night. Even the wind paused as if waiting. Harper stepped closer, almost against her will. Her boots scraped the edge of the stage floor, and she could feel the heat rising from the lights. Her lips trembled. Tears pooled along her lower lashes but did not fall. Elias whispered her name again, and something inside her broke open. She leaned down, her face inches from his. Cameras zoomed in tight, capturing the way her breath shook, the way his eyes softened, the way the world held itself perfectly still. 5 seconds passed. 5 seconds stretched into forever. Her mouth moved, but no sound came. She tried again. A single tear slipped free, tracking down her cheek. She pressed her hand to his shoulder and leaned in close enough that only he could hear the words that would shatter everything around them. Elias, I cannot have children. His face drained of color. The noise of the world crashed back like thunder. The lights seemed to flare too bright. The crowd tilted forward, confused by the sudden change in his expression. Harper stumbled back, her breath catching in her throat as she watched the hope fall from his eyes. The moment froze, suspended, in a silence that crushed the air from her lungs. Then everything cut to black. Elias Mercer had been called many things by the press: visionary genius, impossible perfectionist. But never once had anyone called him understood. In the hours after the failed proposal, the city pulsed with rumors swirling through every subway car and office lobby, while headlines flickered across digital billboards like relentless sparks. Yet inside the glass tower of Orion Industries, where Elias stood alone in his corner office, the world went unnervingly still. The city lights stretched beneath him in a glittering grid, but Elias did not see any of it. His reflection in the window looked like that of a stranger, a man dressed in a perfect suit, with a perfect tie, and a perfect calm that was beginning to crack. The whisper from Harper replayed through his mind with razor clarity. I cannot have children. It was a truth spoken so softly the entire world had missed it, but it hit him harder than any blow he had taken in years. He pressed his palms to the glass, trying to steady the tremor running through him, but the whisper would not fade. On the table behind him lay the documents that had consumed the last 12 months of his life. The Orion Nova deal, a $40 billion partnership with a Japanese tech giant that was supposed to launch the company into a new era. The board had celebrated early, calling it a once-in-a-generation milestone. Elias had poured everything into it, every late night, every forgotten meal, every quiet hour that reminded him he had no family waiting at home. But the morning after the proposal that never finished the contract seemed to sit heavier on his desk, like it sensed trouble coming. He knew the trouble had a name: Ava Thorne. She was everything a modern executive should be: polished, sharp, brilliant, and catastrophically ambitious. She walked into his office without knocking, the click of her heels echoing off the marble floor as she crossed to the center of the room. Her expression was crafted to look sympathetic, but her eyes shone with something colder. Elias, the press is calling nonstop, she said, adjusting her tablet so he could see the headlines. Teacher humiliates CEO on global stage. Billionaire rejected. In front of 7,000. Harper Quinn mystery woman leaves tech industry in chaos. He flinched at her name. Ava noticed, and her smile twitched. I am sorry about what happened, she continued, but public confidence has taken a hit. The stock dropped 14% in 3 hours. Investors are panicking, and our partners in Tokyo have requested an emergency meeting. Elias kept his gaze fixed on the skyline, though his jaw tightened at the edges. He wanted to ask Ava to leave, but he knew that would only fuel her narrative about him being unstable. He breathed in slowly the way his therapist had once advised. Ava stepped closer, lowering her voice. "You are still recovering from your last public scandal. Another one might make the board question your leadership." Elias slid his hands into his pockets, hiding the tension in his fingers. "Is that what you want, Ava? To question it?" She tilted her head, feigning surprise. "Of course not, but optics matter. If you appear distracted, incapable of managing personal issues separate from professional ones, they may reconsider who is best equipped to lead." The implication hung in the air like smoke. For years, Ava had waited for an opportunity to move into the CEO seat, not through merit alone, but through strategy, manipulation, timing. Elias turned away from her, pressing his palm against the edge of his desk to steady himself. He wanted to say something furious, something final, but exhaustion dragged at him. After a long silence, he replied, "I will handle it." Ava nodded, though disappointment flashed across her features. She wanted him to break. She wanted him to fail so spectacularly that the board would not hesitate. Before leaving, she added one more strike. "Perhaps you should distance yourself from that teacher. The world already believes your judgment is compromised." When she left the room, Elias exhaled slowly, like releasing something poisonous. He sank into his chair, leaning back until the city lights blurred. He closed his eyes, searching for the silence beneath the chaos. But all he found was Harper's voice, trembling with fear and honesty. "I cannot have children." It was not rejection. It was confession, a wound she had tried to hide, even from herself. The world believed she had turned him down. They assumed her whisper had been a message of doubt or a soft-spoken no. They did not know that her words were not about him at all. They were about her. For years, Elias had worn solitude like armor. He worked through holidays, missed birthdays, forgot what it felt like to be held. He lived in a penthouse with walls of glass, and no photos, no keepsakes, no memories, because having nothing meant nothing could be taken away. But Harper had slipped past the armor without trying. She sang in subways. She laughed at things he said that were not meant to be funny. She looked at him with unfiltered affection long before she learned his last name. She made the world feel less empty. And now, because of him, she was probably curled somewhere alone, believing she had ruined his life. He stood quickly, grabbing his coat. The door opened before he reached it, and his CFO, Samuel Hayes, stepped inside with worry etched deep in his face. "Elias, you need to stay here. The board wants answers. Our partners want reassurance. The entire company is hanging in the balance." Elias brushed past him. "Then they will have to wait." Sam stared at him, stunned. "Where are you going?" Elias paused in the hallway. "To find the only person who has ever told me the truth, even when it hurt." He started walking again, ignoring Sam's pleas. Behind him, the giant screens on the trading floor showed red arrows tumbling downward. The whispers of employees rose in anxious waves. Ava watched from the mezzanine, her expression unreadable, as Elias entered the private elevator that would take him down to the street. The doors slid shut with a soft metallic sigh, cutting the world off once more. In that quiet space, Elias Mercer felt something he had not felt in years: determination sharpened by fear. He had conquered entire industries, but this was different. This time he was not fighting for a company. He was fighting for a woman who had whispered the one truth capable of breaking him and remaking him in the same breath. The elevator descended. His heart steadied. He would find Harper Quinn no matter what the world believed. Harper Quinn sat on the floor of her small Brooklyn apartment, long after the proposal disaster replayed across every news channel in America. The lights were off, the curtains drawn, the only illumination coming from the thin line of streetlight slipping through the window. Her violin case rested beside her unopened, because she did not trust her hands to hold anything without shaking. The city outside buzzed with its usual noise, honking cars, muffled music, people shouting down the block, but inside her apartment it felt like she lived underwater, every sound distorted, every breath heavy. She kept hearing her own whisper echoing through her mind. I cannot have children, and with each replay, she felt the shame tighten around her chest. It was not the whisper itself, it was what followed the flash of hurt that passed through Elias Mercer's eyes before the crowd swallowed the moment whole. Harper pressed her palms against her face, willing her heartbeat to slow, but guilt pricked at her like needles. She had never asked for any of this, not the attention, not the headlines, not the disbelief of people who assumed she was chasing money or status. Her life before Elias was small and predictable, but it was hers. She taught music at Ridgewood Elementary, where the hallways always smelled like crayons and disinfectant, and where children with missing teeth ran to her with arms flung wide because she knew how to fix broken strings and broken confidence with equal care. She took the subway before sunrise, violin case on her back, coffee in hand, humming melodies to calm the heaviness in her bones. The teachers called her soft but strong. The parents called her patient, but no one really knew her, not the way Elias was starting to. Harper gently touched her abdomen, pressing her palm against the place where hope had once lived. She had been 27 when the doctor told her she had premature ovarian failure. She remembered the sterile room, the smell of alcohol, swabs, the doctor's gentle voice explaining percentages and hormones while her ears rang. She remembered nodding, pretending to understand, pretending to be fine. She remembered going home and curling into herself on the bathroom floor until the tiles went warm beneath her cheek. She remembered the man she had been engaged to running his hands through his hair, saying he needed time. He took that time and gave it to someone else. She learned very quickly that love was easy when people believed the future would be perfect. It was harder when life made no such promises. After the breakup, she avoided dating. She avoided conversations about children. She avoided anything that reminded her of the space inside her that medicine could not fill. She poured herself into music, into teaching, into the joy of watching shy children find courage in a single note sung just right. That joy kept her going. Until Elias. She had met him without knowing who he was on a quiet subway platform, where she was teaching a group of small kids a harmony pattern. He had stood at a distance, listening with that rare stillness she had come to notice. When the other adults rushed past him, he stayed rooted in place, as if he was hearing something he had been missing his whole life. She had finished the song and turned to find him holding a folded piece of paper, his cheeks faintly flushed. "Your voice feels like home," he had written. She kept that note tucked in the back of her violin case. She pretended it was silly, but it wasn't. No one had ever spoken to her soul so directly. She should have walked away then, before things became complicated. Before she learned his name, before she learned that the man who bought $10 Subway coffee and blushed when she fixed his crooked tie was the same man whose face appeared on the covers of magazines. She had not fallen for the billionaire. She had fallen for the man who watched snow fall like it held secrets, the man who whispered thank you in the softest ways, the man who came to her classroom and asked her students about their favorite songs. But now the world knew her name and twisted her story. You seduced him, you embarrassed him, you ruined him. The comments were cruel, the interviews brutal, the videos edited to make her look calculating. She did not care about strangers' opinions. She cared that Elias was being dragged through a fire he did not deserve, and that she had struck the match. Her phone buzzed for the 100th time, but she ignored it, letting it fall silent. She curled her knees to her chest, burying her face in her arms. She wished she could go back to the moment before he knelt before him, opened the ring box before her world cracked. She had seen the sincerity in his eyes. She had felt the tremble in his breath. He had meant every word. And she had ruined everything, not because she wanted to push him away, but because she could not bear the thought of letting him dream of a life she believed she could never give him. A knock sounded at her door, and she tensed, her breath catching. She waited. Another knock followed, softer this time, almost hesitant. Harper. Her breath broke at the sound of her name. It was her neighbor Maria, from 2 doors down, a nurse who often worked night shifts. "Harper, sweetie, open up." She forced herself to stand, her joints stiff, her steps slow. She opened the door, cracking it just enough for Maria to see her tear-stained face. "Oh, honey," Maria murmured, wrapping her arms around her. "Come here." Harper's shoulders shook as she let herself be held. Maria stroked her back gently, saying, "I do not know what that man on the news means to you, but the look on his face tonight, that was not a man embarrassed. That was a man terrified of losing someone he loves." Harper squeezed her eyes shut, pressing her forehead to Maria's shoulder. Because she knew it was true, and that truth was the most painful of all. Elias loved her, and she had broken him with one whispered confession. After Maria left, Harper locked the door and stood in the quiet once more. She wiped her cheeks and walked to her violin case. She opened it and touched the folded note. "Your voice feels like home." For a long moment she stared at it, then whispered into the empty room, "I am sorry, Elias. I just did not want you to choose a future that might never exist." Her tears fell again, but softer, more accepting. She set the note on the table and breathed deeply. She had hidden her silent pain for years, but Elias had seen beyond the layers faster than anyone ever had. And now she had to decide whether to keep running or to give him the truth he deserved, not the fear she had given him in front of 7,000 people. The first time Elias Mercer saw Harper Quinn, he did not know her name. He did not know her story. He did not know he was watching the woman who would one day whisper the truth that would shatter him in front of an entire city. He only knew that something in him went quiet for the first time in years. It happened on a Tuesday morning, the kind of New York morning that tasted like exhaust and cold air, where the platforms smelled of steel and coffee, and the trains arrived with their usual impatient tremble. Elias had taken the subway that day only because his driver called in sick, and because he had not wanted to sit in the back of a black SUV, staring at emails for 40 minutes, pretending to feel something other than exhaustion. He blended easily into the crowd in his dark coat collar, turned-up hair slightly out of place from the wind. No one recognized him in the underground blur of commuters, and teenagers and street musicians, and he was grateful for it. He stood at the far end of the platform, his phone buzzing with a dozen crisis emails he refused to open. And then he heard it. Soft at first, a scattering of notes carried above the noise. A melody warm enough to cut through the cold tile walls. He looked up. 20 feet away, a young music teacher stood surrounded by 6 children in winter jackets, all huddled together as she guided their small voices through a harmony exercise. She clapped gently to keep rhythm smiling every time one of the kids hesitated or sang off key. Harper. Elias did not know that name then, but he felt it before he heard it. Her voice was not loud, it was not dramatic, it was not trained for opera stages or concert halls. It was simple and pure, the kind of sound that felt like it came from someone who had been broken once and chose to heal by giving pieces of herself to others. She crouched to adjust a little girl's mitten, then tapped a boy's shoulder, encouraging him when he looked embarrassed. Her kindness radiated without trying. Something inside Elias stirred. He stepped closer, just enough to hear her better, and the moment the children hit the wrong note, she laughed not in mockery, but in delight. The kids tried again, better this time. Harper lifted her chin, closed her eyes for half a second, and sang the guiding line with them. Elias felt the sound settle in his chest, like warmth moving through a room long shut. The train screeched somewhere distant, but he could not look away. He had stood in boardrooms negotiating billions without blinking, but here watching this woman with a thrift store coat and a violin case with stickers peeling off, he felt his pulse stumble. When the children finished their small performance, Harper gave them each a high five and told them to never fear the wrong notes, because they make the right ones sweeter. The children scattered as the train approached their parents, waving from a few feet away. Harper remained behind, collecting sheet music and gently closing her violin case. Elias's feet moved before he had made a conscious decision. He approached without any plan, without any polished line. All he carried was gratitude for the strange calm she had given him. She noticed him only when he stopped a few feet away. Her eyes widened a little, but she did not step back. Instead, she tilted her head waiting for him to speak. He could not. Words deserted him. Instead, he reached into his coat and pulled out the folded ticket stub he had been holding. He wrote on the blank back with a pen from his pocket, "Your voice feels like home." He handed it to her without explanation. Harper blinked surprised, then read the words a second time, as if unsure they were real. She looked up, meeting his gaze directly. Something like understanding flickered between them. She tucked the note into her violin case. "Thank you," she said, her voice soft but steady. The train doors opened and she took one small step backward. Elias felt something panic inside him. He was the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar empire, yet he had never struggled so much to speak. He managed only 3 words. "What is your name?" The train chimed its last warning. Harper smiled, almost apologetically. She did not answer. The doors slid shut between them. Elias stood there breathing too fast for a man who had run companies since he was 28. He watched the train disappear into the tunnel, feeling foolish for letting her slip away. He had not expected to see her again. But the city had a strange way of colliding fates. 2 days later, he stepped onto a different subway line and froze. Harper stood at the other end, warming her hands against a cup of cheap coffee, humming softly to herself. A girl from her class tugged her sleeve, handing her a crumpled drawing. Harper knelt to examine it as if it were a masterpiece. Elias approached slowly, this time deciding that if fate offered a second chance, he would not waste it. Harper looked up at the exact moment he arrived. Recognition flashed in her eyes, and her shoulders relaxed just slightly. "You again," she said, smiling. Her smile hit him harder than he expected. Elias nodded, unsure if he should shake her hand or offer a greeting or confess he had ridden 3 wrong trains hoping to find her. He did none of those. Instead, he held out a napkin. "You forgot this," he said, though she had not. She frowned playfully. "I do not think I did." He cleared his throat. "I thought maybe it would give me an excuse to say hello." Harper laughed a soft, genuine sound. The little girl beside her tugged Harper's elbow. "Miss Quinn, your friend is tall." Harper covered her smile with her hand. "He is not my friend. Not yet." Elias felt heat rise to his cheeks. He had not blushed since he was a teenager at his first debate competition. Yet this woman had undone every defense he had. The train doors opened. Harper gestured for him to join them. For the first time in years, Elias chose something unplanned. He stepped inside. They talked the entire ride. Not about who he was, not about money, not about business. She asked about his favorite songs, and he asked about the children she taught. And slowly her posture softened. When they arrived at Union Square, the wind was sharp. Harper shivered, and Elias noticed. Without thinking, he reached to adjust her scarf, but stopped midway, suddenly self-conscious. Harper smiled and fixed his tie instead, the way she had done with her students. His breath caught. No one had touched him like that in years with such simple care. She pulled back, unaware of the effect she had on him. She waved goodbye and disappeared into the crowd. Elias remained rooted in place, aware that his world had shifted in a way he could not yet name. That subway meeting did not change everything all at once. It changed everything slowly, like the first note of a song that would eventually become a symphony. In the weeks after the second subway encounter, Elias Mercer began living a double life. Though not the kind he was used to, the kind involving secret board votes or hidden acquisitions. This was gentler, quieter, and far more dangerous. Every morning before sunrise, he slipped out of his penthouse, leaving behind the sterile glow of his untouched kitchen and the weight of Orion Industries. He rode the subway like any other New Yorker coat collar up hair, still damp from the shower coffee bought from the corner cart that overcharged him because the vendor recognized expensive shoes, even when the man wearing them tried to blend in. And every morning he arrived at the same platform where Harper Quinn stood with her violin case slung over one shoulder, humming whatever melody matched the weather. Sometimes it was a soft tune, like a whispered secret, sometimes bright like sunlight through dirty train windows, sometimes melancholy as if she were tuning her heart instead of her strings. She always noticed him before he made it all the way to her. She always smiled. A real smile, not the kind he saw in business meetings or fundraisers. It made him feel disarmed in a way he was still learning to hide. Their morning conversations grew into a pattern, almost a ritual. She brought cheap coffee that tasted vaguely burned, and he pretended it was the best thing he had ever had. He brought pastries from a bakery that only accepted reservations 48 hours in advance, and she pretended she did not know the difference between a $1,000 croissant and a grocery store one. Neither commented on the imbalance. They simply existed in a space where neither wealth nor scarcity mattered. She told him about her students, how Gideon never sang above a whisper, and how Mia had finally learned to clap on beat, and how Tyler tried so hard to hold his bow correctly that his hands shook. Elias told her about Central Park at 4 in the morning, where the air was still clean and the only sound was the rhythm of his running shoes hitting the ground. She said that felt lonely. He said he preferred lonely to disappointed. She tilted her head at that, but did not push. She had a way of making silence feel like understanding, not absence. Some mornings they visited the small street market outside Union Square. Before heading their separate ways, Harper bought discounted sheet music that was already wrinkled around the edges, and Elias bought nothing because he did not need anything, but he still followed her through each vendor stall, entirely content to watch her sort through stacks of forgotten songs. One morning it snowed lightly. Harper blew into her hands to warm them, and Elias noticed the redness on her fingers, the way she tucked them into her sleeves, trying to hide her discomfort. Without a word, he walked to a small vendor stand and bought a pair of gray knitted gloves, the cheapest thing he had bought in years. $10. The vendor bagged them in thin plastic, but Elias removed them and tucked the bag into his pocket. Harper was running late that morning, her phone buzzing with messages from the school. Her scarf slipped off her shoulder, and she reached awkwardly to fix it while balancing her violin case. Elias stepped behind her, gently draping the scarf back into place. She froze for the smallest moment, and he felt her breath catch. When she turned, her eyes softened. "Thank you," she murmured. He almost reached to touch her shoulder, but pulled back his hand, curling into a fist in his coat pocket. He did not trust himself. When she boarded her train, he lingered behind, then walked over to her bicycle, locked against a rail. He slipped the gray gloves into the wicker basket and walked away before she returned. The next day she arrived wearing them. She never mentioned them, and neither did he. Their closeness grew not through grand gestures, but through small things that lodged themselves into the quiet corners of their lives, like the day she brought him a small tin of throat lozenges, because she said singing in cold weather sometimes made her voice feel tight. He told her he did not sing. She said everyone sings, they just forget how. Or the day he accidentally confessed he did not know how to make a grilled cheese sandwich, because his childhood cook forbade him from touching the stove after he set a napkin on fire at age 7. Harper laughed so hard she had to hold on to the subway pole. After that, she promised to teach him one day. Or the evening she left work later than usual and found him waiting outside the school, leaning against the brick wall, trying to look casual but failing spectacularly at it. She teased him, saying he looked like a billionaire, playing dress-up, trying to be normal. He denied it, but blushed anyway. Their days unfolded like that steady, soft, entirely unplanned. At night, Harper lay awake, wondering when exactly he had stopped being the quiet stranger on the platform and started becoming the man she looked for in every crowd. She wanted to tell him the truth about her diagnosis. She wanted to prepare him for the part of her life she hated most. But every time she opened her mouth to tell him, he smiled that rare, warm smile, and her courage vanished into dust. Elias, for his part, rehearsed his own truths late at night, while pacing his penthouse. He wanted to tell her who he really was before she found out from the world, but he feared losing her the moment he said his last name. He feared her stepping back the way everyone else in his life eventually did. calculating what he could offer and what he could take. So he said nothing. One morning, while they walked toward the exit, he caught a thread of her hair on his coat sleeve. Without thinking, he reached to tuck it behind her ear. She stopped breathing for half a second. He lowered his hand quickly, apologizing, but she shook her head, her voice barely above a whisper. "Do not apologize for being gentle." That single line echoed in him for days. Their mornings spent wandering through Union Square, the smell of roasted nuts and cold wind, the chatter of vendors, the sound of violins that had lived too many lives before hers. They were building something fragile, something unfinished, something real. Harper still hid her silent pain, fearing it would break the spell. Elias still hid his identity, fearing it would change everything. But the city kept weaving them together, pulling them closer, thread by thread, until the morning their routine would turn into something deeper, something neither of them could ignore. The night everything shifted began with a storm, warning that half of New York ignored, because storms in the city usually arrived as nothing more than moody rain and the inconvenience of wet shoes. But this one came early, and came hard, dropping a blinding curtain of snow across the skyline by dusk. Harper Quinn had stayed late at school, helping a shy fifth grader rehearse a solo for an upcoming winter recital. By the time she stepped outside, the wind had turned sharp enough to sting her cheeks, and the sidewalks had become a blur of white. She pulled her coat tight and started toward the subway, only to realize trains were delayed across multiple lines. She muttered a nervous breath into the air, then turned her phone on and froze. One message, from Elias. "Are you safe?" She smiled despite the cold. She typed back, "Leaving school now. Snow is wild." His reply came instantly. "Stay where you are. I am coming." Harper stared at the message, confused. "You cannot drive in this. I am not driving." She frowned at her screen. "What does that mean?" Before he could answer, her phone died. The cold had drained the battery faster than she expected. She sighed, rubbing her temples. It was fine, she told herself. She had dealt with storms before. She started walking. The snow thickened quickly, swirling around her like a shaken globe. It coated her hair, her eyelashes, her coat, until she looked like a moving sculpture of winter. She tried to shield her face, but the wind made it impossible. The sidewalks emptied. The noise of the city faded to a soft roar under the storm. Then, through the pale haze of white, someone emerged, walking against the wind, head-bowed coat, dusted in snow. Elias. He reached her before she could call out his name. Relief washed over his face, so visibly it startled her. "Harper," he breathed, stepping close to look her over, as if checking for injuries. "Are you all right?" She nodded, teeth chattering slightly. "You walked here. Through that." He shrugged like it meant nothing, but his hair was wet. His jaw clenched, and the redness in his hands showed exactly how reckless the decision had been. Harper touched his sleeve. "You should not have." "I had to," he said quietly. She opened her mouth to respond, but a heavy gust nearly knocked her off balance, and he caught her elbow, guiding her forward. "Come on, we need shelter." The nearest building still open was the Brooklyn Public Library, its warm glow spilling faintly against the storm. Inside the lobby was nearly empty, the security guard asleep with headphones on. The lights flickered in the distance, but the quiet was soft, peaceful. Elias led her up the stairs to the reading room, where long oak tables stretched between tall windows, now blurred by sheets of white. Harper dropped her violin case and rubbed her hands together, breathing warmth back into them. Elias shrugged off his coat and placed it around her shoulders before she could protest. She looked up at him, surprised by the softness in his eyes. "You are freezing," he said. Harper swallowed, pressing the thick wool closer to her. "Thank you." He sat across from her, the table between them, though the space felt smaller than it should have. For a moment, neither spoke. The storm raged against the windows, but here between old books and dim lights, it felt like time had slowed into something gentle. Harper watched his hands, noticing how they trembled faintly. She leaned forward. "Elias, what were you doing near the school? You were supposed to be at a meeting." He avoided her gaze. "I left early. The storm was getting worse, and I knew you stayed late on recital days." She stared at him, realizing he had been paying more attention to her life than she thought. That thought warmed her in places the cold had not reached. She opened her violin case and took out the instrument, its polished wood reflecting the amber glow of the lamps. Without thinking, she lifted it beneath her chin, testing a soft note that echoed lightly in the room. Elias looked up, eyes widening at the sound. "Play something," she said. "Something you want to hear." He hesitated, then shook his head. "I do not have songs." She smiled. "Everyone does, they just forget." The corners of his mouth lifted faintly, as if her words brushed a memory he had not visited in years. Harper lifted the bow and began to play. A slow, fragile melody poured into the room, filling every corner. Elias closed his eyes, letting the sound settle inside him. It was not just beautiful, it was healing. It was the kind of music that reminded him of things he had buried behind ambition and loneliness. When she finished, the silence that followed felt sacred. She lowered the violin, her voice barely a whisper. "Elias, are you okay?" He opened his eyes, and she saw the shine of tears. He quickly blinked away. "I am not used to people noticing when I am not," he admitted. Harper slid her chair closer, hardly aware she had moved. "You do not have to be used to it," she murmured. He inhaled sharply, as if her presence unsettled something deep inside him. He reached for her hand, but paused inches away, unsure. Harper bridged the distance, placing her fingers lightly over his. His breath hitched. The proximity felt electric and quiet at once. He shifted closer until their knees almost touched. Harper felt the air thicken between them, warm, despite the cold storm pressing against the windows. Elias slowly lifted the edge of the scarf around her neck, adjusting it gently, like she had done for him weeks earlier. His forehead brushed hers, their breaths mingled, soft, fragile, suspended. But he did not kiss her, and she did not lean in. They stayed there, eyes closed, foreheads, touching, feeling the moment, rather than rushing it, the slow burn of two people, finding a home in each other without needing anything more than closeness. The lights flickered as the storm intensified, pulling them back into the world. Harper opened her eyes first. Elias whispered her name as if it were something delicate. She pulled back only enough to look at him fully. "Elias, I have something I want to tell you." The truth trembled at the edge of her throat, the confession she had been carrying like a stone for years. But fear gripped her, fear of losing this warmth, this rare sense of being seen. A loud crack of thunder startled her, causing her to drop her gaze. "Not yet," she whispered. Elias did not push. Instead, he wrapped his hands gently around hers, steadying her breath. "We have time," he said softly. "More time than you think." Outside, the storm raged harder, but inside that quiet library lit by weak lamps and filled with shared silence, something deeper took root between them, something that would become impossible to ignore. The storm cleared by morning, but the consequences did not. New York woke with its usual noise and impatience, but beneath the surface, something had shifted. Someone had seen Elias Mercer and Harper Quinn leaving the Brooklyn Public Library together. Someone had taken a photo through the soft blur of melting snowflakes. Someone had recognized the world's most private billionaire walking beside a woman no one in the media had ever seen before. By noon, the photo had spread across every major news site. By 2 o'clock, the narrative had exploded into chaos. Harper was at school when the first call came in, then the second, then the 16th. The front office buzzed like a hornet's nest. Teachers whispered in hallways. Parents exchanged looks as they picked up their children. Harper walked through it all with her head-down violin case, clutched tightly to her side as if it were armor. She tried to ignore the murmurs. That is the girl from the news, the one who rejected him, the one who trapped him, the one who ruined everything. She wanted to disappear. She did not. She went back to her classroom and tried to resume rehearsal with her students, but even they sensed something wrong. Miss Quinn, one of them, whispered, "Are you okay?" Harper forced a smile. Of course, but her hands shook so hard she dropped her bow twice. Meanwhile, in the glass tower of Orion Industries, Ava Thorne stepped into a conference room filled with executives and journalists. Her stride was smooth, her expression perfectly composed. She clicked a remote, and the image of Elias and Harper, walking close together in the snow, filled the display wall. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, "we must address this before it destroys shareholder confidence." She paused, letting the tension fill the room. "As you see, Elias Mercer is currently involved in an unpredictable emotional entanglement." There was that word, entanglement, a word chosen to sound irresponsible, unprofessional, dangerous. Cameras clicked, pens scratched. Ava continued with icy precision. "This relationship appears to have influenced decisions that affect our global partnerships." While she spoke, her eyes gleamed the way predators did before a kill. Somewhere on the trading floor, the stock ticker dipped another 3%. She hid her satisfaction well. Back in Brooklyn, Harper sank into her chair after her last class and buried her face in her hands. She had not asked for this attention. She had not asked to be thrown into a world that dissected her like an object. She did not know that across the city, Elias Mercer was storming out of a board meeting, refusing to let Ava control the narrative. He did not know where Harper was, but he knew she would be hurting. So he went to her school without waiting for permission, without informing security, without thinking about the cameras that now followed him everywhere. Parents gasped as he stepped onto the sidewalk. Children pressed their faces against classroom windows. Teachers whispered frantically into phones. His security team tried to catch up, but he ignored their calls. He marched through the front doors, past wide-eyed staff, and headed straight to Harper's room because the world had taken enough from her, and he was not about to let them take more. Harper looked up when the door opened and her breath caught. Elias stood there, chest rising and falling, with controlled urgency. His coat dusted with melting snow, his eyes locked on hers, with a mixture of fear and determination. She rose slowly, unable to speak. He crossed the room in 3 long steps, ignoring the startled gasps from passing teachers, and closed the door behind him. "Harper," he breathed, "are you all right?" She shook her head once, unable to hide the tremor in her voice. "They keep calling. The parents, the reporters. The school is upset. Her voice cracked. They think I am some kind of scandal. Elias stepped closer, reaching for her hands before stopping himself. May I? She nodded, and his fingers wrapped around hers. Warm, steady grounding. You did nothing wrong, Harper. Nothing. She looked away, eyes burning. They are saying terrible things. Saying I chased you, saying I ruined your deal, saying you are unfit to run your company because of me. His jaw tightened. That is exactly why I am here. Before she could speak, he turned toward the door, opened it, and stepped into the hallway, where parents and staff had gathered whispering urgently. Silence fell the moment they saw him. Elias stood tall, his voice calm, yet unmistakably commanding. Everyone here needs to hear this. Harper froze behind him, heart pounding. Then Elias spoke the sentence that would replay across news stations for days. Harper Quinn is the most honest and grounded person I have ever met in my life. She has brought nothing but goodness into this world, and she deserves respect, not judgment. The hallway buzzed with stunned murmurs. He continued, voice firm. She did not seek attention. She did not seek me. She did not seek anything but her job and her students. If anyone here believes she is responsible for corporate decisions or stock fluctuations, then the problem is not her integrity, but your assumptions. A parent stepped forward hesitantly. But sir, is this relationship influencing your company? Elias met the woman's eyes directly. My company is influenced by my leadership, not my love life. And I will not allow any narrative that punishes a good woman for existing. Harper covered her mouth, fighting tears. Elias's voice softened. She is extraordinary, and she deserves to teach in peace. When he finished, the room fell silent. The kind of silence that follows a truth spoken too clearly to ignore. He turned back to Harper and held out his hand palm open, waiting. Harper stepped forward and placed her hand in his because she did not know what else to do, because she trusted him, because despite everything she was falling for him faster than she could stop herself. Elias guided her gently through the hall, ignoring the stares. He did not care. Outside, photographers snapped photos, but he shielded her with his coat, blocking their view. She leaned into him, trembling from the weight of exposure. He opened the car door for her, but she hesitated, looking at him with conflicted tenderness. Elias, you should not have done that. It will make everything worse for you. He lowered his voice. I do not care how it affects me. I care how this world treats you. She swallowed hard tears, blurring her vision. Why are you doing this? He stepped closer, voice steady. Because sometimes the world finds people who were never meant to face it alone. And I will not let you face it alone. For the first time in her life, Harper did not step back when someone offered to stay. She stepped into the car knowing that the world had found them and nothing would ever be simple again. The decision to leave New York happened without a spoken agreement, as if both of them understood instinctively that the city had become too loud, too sharp, too eager to devour whatever fragile thing was growing between them. The morning after Elias defended Harper at school, the press camped outside her apartment, and reporters waited near every subway entrance. Parents began emailing the principal, demanding statements. The noise grew suffocating, so when Elias appeared at her doorstep at dawn, holding 2 coffees and an apologetic smile, she did not ask where they were going. She simply stepped outside, locked the door behind her, and followed him. His black SUV waited on the curb, but for once he did not sit in the back. He opened the passenger door for her and slid behind the wheel himself, fingers gripping the steering wheel like a man ready to run from the world. He glanced at her and she nodded once a silent yes. He started driving north. Hours passed before she worked up the courage to ask where they were headed. Vermont, he said quietly, eyes fixed on the winding road. A cabin, no cameras, no noise, just quiet. Harper leaned back into her seat, letting the tension drain from her muscles little by little. As the city disappeared behind them, and the landscape softened into rolling hills and snow-covered pines, she had never seen him so calm and yet so unsettled at the same time, like someone who was finally breathing real air but afraid it would be taken away. By the time they reached the cabin, the late afternoon sun had dipped behind the mountains, casting long blue shadows across the snow. The cabin itself was small and wooden, with smoke curling from the chimney and a porch light flickering against the falling flakes. It looked like something from a storybook, a place untouched by the chaos consuming their lives. Harper stepped out of the car, drawing a sharp breath. The beauty of the place hit her like a wave. Elias watched her quietly, his pockets stuffed in his coat, his expression softening as he took in her awe. "Do you like it?" She nodded, unable to speak. They carried their bags inside, and the warmth of the fireplace wrapped around them, instantly melting the cold from their clothes. The interior smelled faintly of cedar and old books, with a wool blanket draped over a worn leather couch and rows of mismatched mugs lining the shelves. Harper moved slowly, taking it all in. "This does not look like somewhere you usually stay," she said. Elias shrugged almost sheepishly. "It is not mine, belongs to an old mentor. He lets me use it when I need space." She raised an eyebrow. "You need space often, more than I admit." He dropped his keys onto the counter and exhaled deeply, like he had been holding his breath for days. Harper set her violin case down near the couch, her fingers brushing the worn wood. She sensed his exhaustion, the kind that no amount of wealth or power could soften. "You have not slept much, have you?" He gave a humorless smile. "Not really. Too much noise in my head." Harper understood that more than he knew. They spent the next hour in comfortable silence, unpacking groceries, lighting candles, adjusting the fire. Elias found an old cast-iron skillet and attempted to make grilled cheese for them both. Harper laughed when he burned the first one. "You promised to teach me," he complained, and she nudged him aside, gently taking over. He watched her cook with a quiet intensity, as if memorizing the ordinary movement of her hands. When they sat down to eat, their shoulders brushed lightly. Neither moved away. After dinner, he led her outside to the porch where a soft dusting of snow blanketed the railing. The forest stood silent except for the faint rustle of wind through pine branches. Harper wrapped her scarf tighter, while Elias leaned against the railing, his breath forming small clouds. "It is peaceful here," she whispered. He nodded. "I needed you to have a place where the world could not get to us." She hesitated before asking softly, "Did it get worse after yesterday?" He clenched his jaw. The stock fell again. "The partners in Tokyo postponed the Nova signing. The board is questioning my stability. And Ava," he sighed, shaking his head, "Ava is telling them I am compromised." Harper felt guilt gather in her chest. "Because of me, because of all this." He turned to her so quickly she flinched. "No, not because of you, because of them, their greed, their fear, their obsession with perfection." "You did nothing wrong, Harper." She looked away, snowflakes catching in her hair. She wanted to believe him, but the world had taught her otherwise. They returned inside when the cold became too sharp. Harper curled on the couch with a blanket. while Elias sat on the floor beside her, back against the couch cushions, knees bent, hands clasped loosely. He looked younger in the firelight, softer somehow. After a long moment, he whispered, "Harper." She hummed in response. "There is something I have wanted to tell you." She tensed. Her secret hovered just beneath her ribs, pressing, pushing, aching. But he spoke first. "I am scared." She blinked, surprised. "Of what?" "Of losing something I barely have the courage to want." She lowered the blanket, watching him carefully. "Elias." He looked up at her, eyes unguarded. "I do not let people close. I have not for a long time. It is easier to be alone, safer. But you make me want things that terrify me." She felt her throat tighten. Elias leaned his head back against the couch, closing his eyes, his voice trembling slightly when he said, "When you are near, everything feels less heavy. When you smile, it feels like something in me remembers how to breathe." Harper swallowed the emotion rising in her chest. "Elias." He opened his eyes again, meeting her gaze. "What is it?" She bit her lip. Her secret clawed at her, ready to surface, but fear held her frozen. "Not now," she whispered. He nodded, though disappointment flickered through his eyes. "When you are ready." She shook her head, struggling for breath. "I do not know if I will ever be ready." He reached for her hand, gently giving her an easy escape if she wanted to pull away. She did not. He brushed his thumb lightly across her knuckles. "Then we take this slow. No pressure, no expectations, just truth when you can give it." Harper felt something inside her loosen, something old and aching. For the first time in years, she felt seen without being judged, loved without being demanded, worthy without being measured. When the fire burned low, they stayed there in silence, Harper with her head resting lightly against the back of the couch, and Elias sitting close enough that their hands remained intertwined. Outside, the Vermont woods stood quiet and indifferent, but inside the cabin, truth hovered just beneath the surface, ready to change everything once spoken. The drive back to New York felt different from the way up. They left Vermont at dawn, the sky still gray, the roads slick with thin ice. Harper watched the trees roll past in blurred lines of white and green, while Elias gripped the steering wheel with a tension he tried to hide. The quiet between them was no longer the comfortable kind. It carried weight, an unspoken truth, hanging just above their heads, waiting for the right moment to fall. Harper sensed something was building inside him, something he had been holding back since the day the world discovered them. When they reached the city, the familiar skyline felt sharper, less forgiving. Reporters still camped in clusters near her block. Photographers still sprinted after any car resembling his. The world was still hungry for a story, and Elias had decided to give them one. That afternoon, Harper sat on the couch in the Vermont cabin, replaying the weekend in her mind, while Elias stood near the window, staring out at the frozen lake. He had barely slept, and she could tell. Even when he smiled, the exhaustion pressed at the edges. She approached him quietly, resting a hand against the window frame. "Elias, talk to me. What is happening at the company?" He hesitated. She felt the answer before he said it. "Ava, she is pushing for a vote," he admitted. "They think I am distracted, unstable, a liability." Harper's stomach twisted. "Because of me." He turned instantly, voice sharp. "Do not say that, not even as a joke." She swallowed. "I am not joking." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "They were looking for a reason, Harper. I just gave them a more convenient one." She did not respond. He took her hands gently. "But there is something else. something I cannot keep inside anymore. Her breath stilled. Elias. He looked at her with a mixture of fear and certainty. I want to show the world that I choose you, that I am not ashamed, that nothing they say or speculate or fabricate will change what I feel. She blinked, startled. Elias, what are you saying? He brushed a strand of hair behind her ear hands, trembling slightly. I am going to propose again. Her heart slammed against her ribs so hard it hurt. Elias, no, you cannot. Not publicly, not while everything is collapsing around you. You do not owe the world that. His eyes darkened with resolve. I do not care about the world. I care about you. She stepped back, shaking her head. Elias, stop. You do not understand what you are risking. He stepped toward her, refusing to let the space widen. I know exactly what I am risking. My company, my reputation, my future. But none of it matters if I lose you. Tears stung her eyes. Elias, please. You do not know everything about me. There are things that will change how you see me. Things that will hurt you. He shook his head slowly. Nothing could make me stop wanting you. Harper's breath wavered. You do not know that. He cupped her face gently, forcing her to look at him. Then tell me, here, now. Tell me what you are so afraid of. She froze. The truth clawed its way up her throat, desperate to escape, but fear strangled it back down. She could not say it, not yet, not like this. The silence stretched long enough for him to understand she was not ready. He dropped his hands, stepping back, but his voice stayed soft. Then let me give you something instead. She looked up, confused. Elias, what are you planning? He inhaled slowly. Something big enough to silence everyone who doubts us. Before she could protest, he continued. The Orion Nova launch event is in 3 days, 7,000 people, half the tech world watching. I am going to ask you to marry me again. Harper's chest tightened painfully. Elias. He gave her a faint, heartbreaking smile. I know you are scared. I know you carry something heavy, but I am not leaving you to carry it alone. She shook her head, voice trembling. You cannot do this, not for me, not like this. He whispered, I am doing it for us. The next 3 days passed in a blur. Harper barely slept. Elias barely ate. The city buzzed with speculation. Ava worked behind the scenes, crafting a narrative to paint him unstable. The board prepared to question his leadership again. But Elias tuned it all out. There was only one thing he cared about, her. On the morning of the launch event, Elias stood backstage at Rockefeller Center. Dressed in a charcoal suit, jaw-tight eyes fixed on the glowing countdown screens. Thousands of people filled the plaza, bundled in coats, clutching hot drinks, buzzing with anticipation for the unveiling of the new Orion Nova. Cameramen adjusted their angles. Journalists whispered into microphones. The air vibrated with electricity. Harper stood at the back of the stage, hands shaking violently inside her sleeves. She had not wanted to come. She had begged him not to put her in this position. But every time she tried to walk away, something in her refused. Something fragile and stubborn and terrifying. She loved him, and love made fools of the strongest people. A soft snow began to fall, dusting her hair. Her heartbeat fluttered painfully as Elias stepped into the light. The crowd roared. He should have looked triumphant, charismatic, untouchable. Instead, he looked human, vulnerable, and entirely hers. Cameras flashed wildly. Reporters leaned forward. Ava watched from the sidelines, arms crossed, smile thin as a blade. Elias greeted the crowd, then spoke about innovation, connection, the future. But Harper could hear the tremor beneath his voice. Then halfway through his speech, he paused. He looked toward her. The world held its breath. "Harper Quinn, please join me on stage." Her stomach dropped. The audience erupted in whispers. Harper froze. Elias extended his hand from across the platform. The invitation was a lifeline and a test, and a promise all at once. Slowly she stepped forward, moving as if through water. When she reached him, he took her hand, threading their fingers together, steadying her trembling. He turned to the crowd, his voice steadying. "Before I unveil Orion Nova, I want to show you something far more important." The moment he reached into his pocket, Harper stopped breathing. Not again, not here, not like this. But the world was already watching. The spotlights shifted. Silence fell heavy and complete. Elias Mercer dropped to one knee for the second time in front of thousands. And Harper Quinn felt the ground tilt beneath her feet. The world did not simply pause. It stopped breathing. The lights of Rockefeller Center glowed in a soft haze of falling snow as Elias knelt before her again, the diamond ring catching 1,000 reflections from the towering screens above. Harper Quinn stood frozen, her pulse thundering against her ribs, her vision blurring as the weight of 7,000 eyes pressed against her skin. She could feel the heat from the spotlights, feel the tremor in Elias's hands, feel the world narrowing down to the space between them and the truth she had buried for years. His voice carried through the winter air, amplified across the plaza, and into every live stream around the world. "Harper Quinn, you are the bravest woman I know, the kindest soul I have ever met. You make the world quieter, better, and I cannot imagine my life without you." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Phones lifted, cameras zoomed. Harper felt her knees weaken. Elias looked up at her eyes, soft, vulnerable, in a way she had never seen from a man who commanded boardrooms and quieted entire industries. "Harper, will you marry me?" The question hung suspended between them. She did not hear the cheers or the whispered speculation or the reporters tripping over themselves to capture the moment. She heard only her heartbeat and the truth she had swallowed at every turn. She wanted to say yes. God, she wanted to. But her body reacted before her mind did, pulling her forward, just enough to place her hand on his shoulder. "Elias, we need to talk," she whispered almost silently. He leaned in, thinking she needed reassurance. "Harper, it is okay. I am right here." But her throat tightened. No, it is not okay. She felt the truth claw its way upward, burning her lungs, demanding release. She bent closer, her lips near his ear, not because she wanted secrecy, but because she physically could not force the words any louder. "Elias, I cannot have children." The whisper sliced the night open. Elias's breath caught his body going still before he could form a response. The microphones did not catch her words, but the cameras caught everything else. The way his expression faltered, the way her face crumpled, the way her hand pulled back slowly, as if releasing him from something sacred. For a brief, suspended second, the world watched without knowing what they were witnessing. Then Ava Thorne stepped forward from backstage like a shark smelling blood. Her heels clicked against the stage floor, cutting into the silence. She lifted a microphone with calculated grace and spoke with a tone drenched in artificial concern. "Ladies and gentlemen, it appears Mr. Mercer has been rejected." The crowd gasped, whispering, erupting into confused noise. Harper's chest tightened painfully. No, she tried to say, but her voice vanished under the swell of sound. Ava pressed on. "Let us give them privacy. Please step back." The narrative twisted instantly. Rejection, embarrassment, scandal. Harper could feel the headlines already forming like knives. Elias stood slowly still, holding the ring, but now his hand shook. Harper, I did not ask you because of children. I asked you because I love. She stepped back, tears flooding her vision. Elias, please, please do not do this here. The panic inside her ignited. She was not rejecting him. She was trying to save him. Save his reputation, his company, his future. Save him from the burden of choosing a life without something he might one day want, no matter what he believed in this moment. But the world saw only one thing, a woman stepping away, a billionaire left kneeling alone, a love story unraveling beneath the glare of 1,000 lights. Harper turned. Someone shouted. A camera flashed directly in her face, white and blinding. Elias reached out instinctively, but she stumbled back, shaking her head. I am sorry, she whispered, her voice cracking. She stepped off the stage before he could follow, weaving through the stunned crowd. People parted for her, but the whispers followed like a tide. She ran past the rink, past the barricades, past the rows of cameras that caught her tears reflecting in the snow. She kept running until her lungs burned and the cold sliced her throat. Behind her, Elias stood on the stage, still holding the ring, as the crowd swallowed him in murmurs. A man who had built empires brought to his knees not by failure, not by scandal, but by heartbreak he never expected. Security moved toward him. Reporters shouted questions. Flashes burst around him, but he heard none of it. He heard only the echo of her whisper, repeating through him like a wound reopening. I cannot have children. His chest tightened painfully, not because of the meaning, but because of the fear he had heard woven into the words. Not fear of a future, fear of losing him. Ava appeared beside him, placing a hand on his arm. Elias, we should step off the stage. He pulled away sharply, and she blinked, startled. Do not touch me, he said, voice low but firm enough to silence the crowd nearest him. Ava hid her irritation behind a mask of sympathy. Elias, this was bound to happen. You let your emotions interfere with your judgment. Let me handle the press. Let me handle the fallout. His jaw clenched. He stared straight ahead, eyes fixed on the space where Harper had stood moments ago. No, you have handled enough. She stiffened. Are you blaming me for what she did? He turned to her slowly. Ava, the only person I blame is myself for letting you anywhere near my life. She inhaled sharply, face flashing with wounded innocence, but beneath it, fury simmered. Elias left the stage, ignoring the chaos around him, ignoring the board members who tried to stop him, ignoring security calling his name. He walked straight through the plaza, the ring still clutched in his hand, snow collecting on his hair-shoulders coat. People whispered as he passed, but he did not hear them. All he saw was the empty space where Harper had dissolved into the crowd. He stopped at the sidewalk chest, heaving eyes burning. Harper had not rejected his love. She had rejected the idea of becoming a burden, and that truth ripped him open in a way he did not know how to mend. He looked at the ring in his palm, then closed his fist around it, determination rising through the heartbreak. He whispered into the cold air, barely audible, even to himself, I am not letting you go. And as the snow fell harder around him, the world kept spinning, unaware that this whisper, not the proposal, not the spectacle, not the headlines, would be the moment that changed everything. Elias Mercer had survived hostile takeovers, board assassinations, sleepless years of building an empire from nothing, but nothing had ever leveled him the way that night had. By morning, New York was roaring. Every news station replayed the footage of Elias kneeling alone, the crowd gasping the mysterious whisper no microphone had caught. Headlines screamed about rejection, humiliation secrets. Orion Industries, one of the most influential tech giants in America, plummeted 27% before noon, wiping billions from its valuation in hours. The world smelled blood. Investors panicked. Journalists camped outside his penthouse. Commentators speculated that he had finally cracked under pressure. And at the center of the frenzy sat Ava Thorne, sliding into power with a smile, sharpened like a blade. She appeared on morning news segments with carefully rehearsed sorrow, telling the world Elias needed rest and clarity after a deeply emotional incident. Orion must remain strong, she said, and we will ensure stability while Mr. Mercer steps back. Those words hit Elias like a punch when the board voted hours later to temporarily remove him from the CEO's seat, citing emotional instability and compromised judgment. Ava slid into the interim role effortlessly, shaking hands, taking photos, projecting poise. It was everything she had always wanted, and nothing Elias bothered to fight her for, because he could not focus on the company, not yet. Not when Harper had vanished. He did not speak at the hearing. He did not defend himself. He simply stood, walked out, and left everyone stunned. His chief of staff, Matteo, chased after him in the hallway. Elias, wait. Talk to me. Let me help. Elias kept walking, his voice raw. I do not need help with the company. I need Harper. Matteo grabbed his arm. Elias, she is scared. You saw it. She was trying to protect you, not hurt you. Elias's throat tightened. She thinks she ruined my life, but she is the only part of it that ever felt real. He left the building through a back exit, dodging cameras, and stepped into the biting winter night. Snow bit at his face, but he welcomed it. It kept him awake, focused, alive. Harper Quinn had disappeared without a trace. Her apartment was empty, her phone off. Her workplace said she had taken an emergency leave. Her neighbors said they saw her dragging a suitcase into a rideshare at dawn. No destination, no contact, nothing but a ghost trail of heartbreak. Elias stood in her classroom doorway the next day. The tiny chairs, the drawings on the walls, the warm, soft remnants of her world, making his chest clench. On her desk sat the violin she had repaired for a student. A small, sticky note was attached. Play, smile, keep going. He touched the violin lightly, imagining her hands there, imagining her laughter, the way she hummed when she concentrated, the way her eyes softened when she spoke about music. Matteo waited behind him. Elias, we can hire investigators. We can trace her payment history. Ask her friends. Elias shook his head slowly. She did not want to be found by force. She left because she thinks she is protecting me. But I am done letting fear make choices for us. Before Matteo could answer, Elias walked out of the room, determination settling into his bones like steel. He went to the only place that made sense. The cabin, the tiny secluded Vermont cabin where she had once smiled softer, breathed easier, looked freer than he had ever seen. He drove through the night, through snowstorms past state lines, refusing to stop, refusing to rest. Matteo called him repeatedly. Investors are threatening to pull out. Ava is meeting with foreign partners without you. The Japanese acquisition is falling apart. They want answers. Elias responded only once. I am not losing her. Let the board wait. Let the world burn. I will fix everything after I find Harper. He hung up and pushed forward the blizzard, swallowing the highway. the world narrowing into a tunnel of white. By dawn, his windshield was coated with ice, his body aching from the drive, his heart hammering with dread. He reached the clearing. The cabin stood quiet, half buried in snow. No lights, no smoke, just silence. For a moment his hope faltered. Maybe she was not here. Maybe he had lost her entirely. But then he saw it. Footprints. Small, delicate footprints leading from the path to the door. His breath caught. He stepped out of the car, the freezing cold slicing through him, and followed them slowly, as if afraid they would disappear. He reached the door, lifted his hand, and knocked. Nothing. He knocked again, harder this time, his voice cracking. "Harper!" Silence. He swallowed hard, leaned his forehead against the wooden door, a man carved open by longing. "Harper, please, I know you are in there." His breath shuddered in the cold. "I know why you left. I know what you think you are saving me from. But you are wrong. I will never choose a world without you." Still nothing. Then a soft sound. Footsteps. The latch turned. The door opened only a few inches, just enough for him to see, her eyes red from crying, her face pale, her hair messy from sleepless nights. Harper whispered, fragile, "Elias, you cannot be here." He exhaled a breath that sounded like breaking. "Harper." He reached through the crack, touching the edge of her sleeve with trembling fingers. "I am not leaving without you." She shook her head, tears building again. "You lost everything because of me, the company, your reputation, your future." Elias's voice hardened with certainty. "I can rebuild all of that. I cannot rebuild you." She closed her eyes, tears slipping down. Elias whispered again, softer this time, aching. "I refused to give up on you the moment I met you, and I am not starting now." Her lips trembled. "Why are you doing this?" "Because he said, stepping closer until the cold air between them warmed. Because I love you, and losing you is the one thing I will never survive." The door slowly opened wider, letting him in, letting warmth spill onto the snow, letting the world outside fall away. He stepped inside, and the door closed behind them, beginning the quiet truth of everything they had tried to run from. Harper stood in the dim cabin light, trembling as the door clicked shut behind Elias, the soft thud echoing through the small wooden space like a heartbeat. Snow drifted past the windows in heavy sheets, muting the world outside, until it felt like they were the last two people left on Earth. Her breath came unsteady, each inhale sharp with fear and longing tangled together. Elias stepped closer, not fast, not overwhelming, but with the careful, aching slowness of a man who knew one wrong move could shatter the fragile line between them. She wiped at her eyes, even though tears kept spilling. "You should not have come." Elias shook his head, once water melting from his hair onto his coat. "There was no version of my life where I stay away from you." Harper turned from him, walking deeper into the cabin, clutching her arms as if holding herself together. "You lost your job because of me. Your company, your board. They think you are unstable. You could lose everything you built. Why risk more?" Elias followed her voice, soft but steady. "Because none of it matters without you." Harper stopped but did not turn. He took a breath, not the confident breath of a billionaire, used to controlling outcomes, but the unsteady inhale of a man walking into emotional fire willingly. "Harper, look at me." She shook her head. "Elias, please. It is easier if I do not." "No," he said gently but firmly. "It is not easier. It is just lonelier." Slowly, painfully, she turned. Their eyes met, and something inside her crumbled. He stepped toward her until only a foot of space remained. the kind of space charged with everything unspoken, everything feared, everything wanted. Harper's voice cracked. I did not want to ruin your future. You want a family one day, children, a life full of things I cannot give you. He moved closer until their breaths mingled in the cold air. You think of family as something you owe me. Harper, it is something we build and we choose together. She flinched as if the words hurt more than comforted. My ex chose someone else because she could give him children. Because she was whole. I am not whole, Elias. Something in him broke at that, his eyes softening with devastation for the pain she carried. Harper, you are not broken. You are scarred and strong and real. You are more whole than anyone I have ever met. She closed her eyes, tears falling faster. You say that now, but what about in 5 years or 10, when you see other people with kids? When the board pressures you to marry someone who can continue your legacy? He lifted his hand, slowly giving her the chance to pull away. She did not. His palm settled gently against her cheek, warm against her cold, tear-streaked skin. My legacy, he whispered, is not measured in children. It is measured in who I love and how I love them. Love is not biology, it is choice. She leaned into his touch, and a quiet sob escaped her. Elias pulled her into him, wrapping an arm around her waist, not with urgency but with a kind of reverence, like he was holding something sacred. Her forehead pressed against his chest, her fingers gripping his coat, as if she could anchor herself to him. His voice fell to a whisper into her hair. The moment you walked away was the moment everything inside me collapsed. Not because I wanted a different future, but because I wanted it with you. Snow piled against the windows. The fire flickered low. The cabin felt like a warm, fragile bubble in a freezing world. Harper trembled against him, exhausted from running, from hiding, from holding the weight of her truth alone for so long. Elias's hand slid into her hair fingers, threading through it gently, soothingly. Harper cried into his chest, unable to stop, unable to pretend any longer. I did not want to hurt you, she whispered. I just wanted to protect you. Elias tipped her chin up with unbearable tenderness. Then let me protect you, too. A tear slipped down her cheek, and he caught it with his thumb. The intimacy of the gesture hit her with painful sweetness. She swallowed hard. Elias, I am scared. I know, he murmured. So am I. But I would rather be scared with you than fearless without you. Her chest tightened, overwhelmed with the weight of his words. Their foreheads touched softly, breath to breath, heartbeat to heartbeat, their bodies framed by the quiet hush of snow. For a moment, neither spoke. They just stood in that fragile space, letting the truth settle, allowing years of pain, shame, fear, and longing melt between them. Then Elias whispered the words she had feared hearing and needed more than anyone had ever known. I love you, Harper Quinn. Her breath hitched. Do not say that because you pity me. Elias exhaled a raw, pained breath. This is not pity. This is the clearest thing I have ever felt in my life. Harper's voice shook. I do not know how to believe that. Then I will show you. His hand cupped her jaw, his thumb brushing her cheek, in slow, careful movements. His other hand rested at her waist, holding her close but not trapping her. Every touch was gentle, every breath measured, every movement. Asking without speaking, Harper felt something in her chest open like a door she had bolted shut for years. The world fell away. The fear softened. The room brightened in the fire glow. And when he leaned in, it was not with hunger or urgency. It was with devotion. The first kiss was soft, hesitant searching. A brush of lips tender enough to break her open completely. She gasped a small, fragile sound, and he deepened the kiss only slightly, letting her guide the pace, letting her feel safe, letting her choose him in her own time. Harper clutched his coat as the kiss grew warmer, and the years of loneliness inside both of them melted into something pure and steady and unbearably healing. When they finally parted, foreheads still touching, Harper whispered a truth she had not been brave enough to admit even to herself. "Elias, I think I love you too." His breath trembled with relief. "Then we start here. No expectations, no timelines, no definitions carved in stone. Just us." Harper nodded, tears shining in her eyes. Just us. He pulled her into his arms again, holding her as the snow fell heavier, turning the world outside white and quiet, as if blessing everything that had just been spoken, everything that had just been mended. In that small wooden cabin, they stopped being two broken people. They became two people, finding a way forward together. Morning light filtered through the cabin's frosted windows, turning the room a pale gold, as Harper woke with her cheek against Elias's shoulder. His arm wrapped around her as if he had been afraid to let go even in sleep. For a moment she lay still, listening to the soft rhythm of his breathing, feeling the steady rise and fall of his chest beneath her hand, and letting the peace of it settle deep into her bones. But peace did not last. Elias stirred, opening his eyes slowly, and giving her a soft, sleepy smile that made her heart tighten. "Good morning," he murmured, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face. She blushed, whispered back, "Morning, Elias." But the warmth in the room was pierced by reality. The world had not paused for their confession the night before. And what waited for him outside this cabin was chaos. As if on cue, Elias's phone buzzed repeatedly, on the table vibrating like a warning. He did not move to check it. Harper did. Her voice was soft. "You should see what is happening." Elias inhaled the breath of a man preparing for war. He reached for the phone, unlocking it to a flood of messages, articles, missed calls, reports, everything drenched in disaster. Orion's stock had crashed even lower. The Japanese deal worth $40 billion had collapsed completely. Reporters insisted he had suffered an emotional breakdown. Ava Thorne announced a company restructuring without him, and a headline glared at the top of the screen like a wound. "Is Elias Mercer unfit to lead?" Harper's chest tightened. "Elias, I am so sorry." He looked up sharply, shaking his head. "No, do not carry that burden. This is not because of you." Ava saw an opening she always wanted, and she used it. But that ends now. Harper searched his eyes, seeing not the broken man she feared he might become, but someone sharpening into purpose, someone reclaiming himself. Elias sat up, running a hand through his hair, determination settling visibly across his features. Harper listened as he spoke, quietly but with rising force. "I let fear decide who I was for too long. I let people steer my life to fit their expectations, but last night you reminded me of who I want to be. And it is time to fight." Harper touched his hand. "Fight for the company. Fight for us," he corrected. They shared a soft, steady look that felt like the beginning of something unshakable. Before noon, they were driving back toward New York, the storm lifting behind them, as if clearing the path ahead. Harper was nervous, but Elias's hand rested over hers on the console, reassuring her with each gentle squeeze. When they reached Manhattan, reporters swarmed like locusts. People shouted questions, cameras flashed, 100 voices clashed in a chaotic storm. Elias stepped out of the car and the noise exploded, but he held Harper's hand, firmly grounding them both. Reporters shouted, "Elias, did you have a breakdown? Did she reject you? Is it true Harper Quinn is the reason Orion collapsed?" Elias lifted a hand and the crowd fell shockingly quiet. His voice was calm but carried a resonance that silenced even the loudest skeptics. "I did not lose control. I did not get rejected. And Harper is not the reason my company is facing a storm. She is the reason I am able to face it." The statement sent a wave through the crowd. Harper's breath hitched. Elias continued, "She is not a scandal. She is not a strategy. She is someone I care for deeply. And what happened in Vermont is something I will defend with everything I have." Another wave of murmurs rolled through the press. His eyes lifted to the cameras with renewed authority. "As for Orion Industries, I will address that in a formal conference. Till then, I have only one request. Treat the woman I love with respect." The words hit Harper like a physical force warmth, surging through her despite the cold wind whipping around them. And the media erupted. Staff hurried them inside, away from the chaos. But inside Orion headquarters, another battlefield waited. The boardroom was packed. Board members, stiff with tension, analysts, whispering assistants shuffling documents urgently. And at the head of the table sat Ava Thorne in a fitted black suit. Legs crossed, a smile carved from polished ice. "Elias," she rose, smooth, practiced, confident. "We were just discussing how to stabilize the company after your absence." Elias kept his shoulders straight, his hand still wrapped around Harper's. "Thank you, Ava, but that will not be necessary." A flicker of irritation crossed her face. "Elias, the board has voted. You are unfit to lead right now, and until further notice, I am acting CEO." Elias leveled a calm, unwavering look at her. That vote was made under manipulated information. Ava's brows lifted. Manipulated? Elias nodded. Yes. He turned to the board. "I may have stepped away for personal reasons, but the person who jeopardized this company is standing right there." The board members exchanged glances, confused. Ava tried to smile. "Elias, you are emotional. You are grasping. Am I?" He tapped a button on the table. Screens lit up around the room, showing leaked emails, falsified narratives, articles seeded by anonymous sources, all pointing back to the communications department under Ava's control. Harper covered her mouth, stunned. Elias spoke evenly. "Ava orchestrated a smear campaign not only against Harper but against me. She leaked confidential timeline documents, sabotaged relationships with foreign partners, and destabilized investor trust." Board members murmured, rising in shock. Ava's mask cracked. "Elias, you have no proof that I personally—" Another click of the button. An audio recording filled the room. Ava's voice cold and calculating. "If we push the emotional instability angle, the board will replace him immediately. Once he is out, the acquisition can fall through and I can step in as interim." Silence hit the room like thunder. Harper felt Elias's fingers tighten gently around her hand, grounding him. Elias looked at the board. "That is your acting CEO? Now tell me, who here believes she has Orion's future in mind?" Ava's face drained of color. Security stepped toward her, and the board chairman spoke with a decisive voice. "Ava Thorne, you are hereby removed pending investigation. Escort her out." As she was led away, her eyes shot daggers at Harper, then at Elias, but neither flinched. Once she was gone, the room filled with shifting energy and murmurs. Before the chairman turned to Elias, "Mr. Mercer, what would you like to do?" Elias lifted Harper's hand, intertwining their fingers. "I would like my position reinstated and I would like the company to publicly condemn the harassment of Harper Quinn. A beat. Then unanimous nods erupted around the table. Motion passed. Welcome back, Mr. Mercer. Harper's chest flooded with emotion. Elias looked at her with a soft warmth that made everything else fade. I told you I would fight, he whispered. She gave a small, trembling smile. And you won. He squeezed her hand gently. No, Harper, we won. 3 years later, Central Park glowed beneath the soft amber light of a late summer afternoon. The kind of warm, gentle day New Yorkers wished they could bottle and keep forever. Laughter rang across the grassy field where a small group of children gathered holding tiny violins and ukuleles waiting for their lesson to begin. At the center of the group stood Harper Mercer, her hair tied loosely back, her smile bright as she adjusted a little boy's chin rest with the same tenderness she had once offered strangers on subway platforms. The world around her buzzed with life, but she carried a peace she had once believed she would never earn. A peace she had built with her own hands and heart. Just beyond the circle, Elias Mercer kneeled in the grass, helping a pair of 4-year-old twins tie their shoes. The twins, one boy and one girl, wore matching denim overalls and identical, mischievous expressions, the kind of look only children who had been thoroughly loved could wear. Dad, one of them asked, tugging his sleeve, "Can we have ice cream after Mommy finishes class?" Elias ruffled the boy's hair, pretending to think. "Ice cream, I am not sure. Did you two practice your scales like you promised?" They both nodded with theatrical enthusiasm, and Elias chuckled. "Then I suppose ice cream is legally required." The girl squealed and threw her arms around his neck. "You promise." Elias pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "I promise." Harper watched from across the lawn, a gentle warmth blooming in her chest. 3 years ago, she had run from everything, believing herself unworthy, incapable, broken. Now she stood in a park full of music, sunlight, children, and hope. A life she thought she would never have, and yet it felt as natural as breathing. Elias caught her watching him and smiled, with the full, unguarded affection of a man who knew exactly how lucky he was. She felt her heart catch, just like it had the first time he looked at her across a subway crowd. After class, the children hugged Harper goodbye, the last little girl leaving a small drawing in her hand. It was stick figures, one tall one with long hair, 2 tiny shapes, and a big sun above them all. Harper smiled softly, closing her fingers around the paper. When she approached Elias, he rose from the grass, brushing dirt off his jeans. The twins raced around them, pretending to be airplanes. Elias reached for Harper's waist, pulling her gently into his side. "Another masterpiece of the Mercer family, I see," he said, nodding to the drawing. Harper laughed. "I cannot hang all of them on the fridge. We will need another house soon." Elias pressed a kiss to her temple. "Then we will buy one." She swatted his chest lightly. "You cannot just buy a house every time a child draws us." "I can try," he teased. Harper leaned her head against him, feeling his heartbeat steady beneath her cheek. The twins returned, circling them both and tugging their hands. "Mommy, Daddy, can we go get ice cream now?" Harper crouched to their level, cupping their cheeks. "Only if you promise not to fall asleep in the car again, like last time." The boy gasped dramatically. "I did not fall asleep. I was resting my eyes." Elias cleared his throat loudly. "Son, you drooled." The girl pointed accusingly. "Daddy, you drooled too." Harper laughed so hard she had to hold Elias's shoulder to keep from tipping over. They walked through the park together, the twins holding both their hands swinging between them. Elias glanced sideways at Harper, catching another smile he felt in his bones. "You are glowing," he murmured. Harper shrugged shyly. "It is the weather." Elias shook his head gently. "No, it is not." She slowed her steps and looked up at him. "And you look different too." "How so?" "Softer, lighter, happier." Elias stopped walking, turning toward her fully. "Happiness looks good on you," he said. She blushed. "On you too." The twins tugged them impatiently and they continued walking. As they approached the familiar ice cream cart near the Bethesda fountain, Harper noticed a few people recognizing Elias, but instead of rushing him or shouting questions, they offered warm, polite smiles, giving the family space. The public had changed, or maybe he had, or maybe both. Elias ordered ice cream for the twins, then turned to Harper. "And what would my wife like today?" Harper smirked. "Your wife would like mint chocolate chip." He paid, then handed her the cone with a small bow, like she was royalty. "To me, you always will be," he said softly. Harper felt a flutter of emotion rise in her throat. They walked toward a quiet bench near the lake, the twins already covered in melting ice cream and laughing with sticky fingers. Harper sat beside Elias, letting her shoulder press against his, savoring the quiet hum of joy around them. After a long, thoughtful silence, Harper whispered something he had once said to her. "Family is not born, family is chosen." Elias turned to her surprised, then touched. "I meant it then. I mean it even more now." She reached for his hand, intertwining their fingers. "Elias, I used to think my story ended the day the doctor told me the truth about my body. I thought that was it, that life had closed every door, that I had lost the chance to build something beautiful." Elias swallowed emotion, tightening his throat. Harper lifted his hand, pressing it to her heart. "But you showed me that family is not something I failed to create. It is something we created together, and I would choose this life with you again and again." Elias cupped her cheek with his free hand thumb, brushing gently over her skin. "Harper Quinn Mercer, you are the bravest, fiercest, most extraordinary woman I know. You rebuilt me as much as I rebuilt you." She leaned into his touch, eyes soft. "Elias, yes, there is something I want to say." He nodded, giving her every ounce of his attention. She whispered 6 words that wrapped around his heart, with the same quiet power she carried into every room she had ever walked into. "I am not afraid anymore." Elias exhaled a slow, trembling breath, pulling her into a kiss, soft, warm, and steady, the kind of kiss that tasted like sunrise after a long winter. When they pulled apart, the twins barreled into their laps, yelling, "Daddy, Mommy, look, we made a heart in the grass." And somehow they had 2 messy, imperfect ice cream trails shaped into a heart. Harper laughed, tears stinging her eyes. "It is beautiful," she whispered. Elias wrapped his arm around all 3 of them, hulling them close. Harper rested her head on his shoulder, watching the sun dip low, painting the sky in pink and gold. "Maybe I could not create life," she said softly. Elias looked at her with a tenderness it rooted itself inside her. "But you created a home," she finished. He kissed her forehead, whispering, "You created mine." And together, hand in hand with their 2 children, and a future they had chosen, the family they built watched the last light fade over New York, a soft, steady promise that love once found never had to be feared again. If this story touched your heart even a little, then I want you to stay with us, because every day we bring another tale of love, hope, second chances, and the quiet miracles that change ordinary lives. Tell us where you are watching from, because our community, stretches across cities, states, and countries, and your voice matters here. If you felt connected to Harper and Elias, if you saw a piece of your own fears, heartbreaks, or dreams in their journey, leave a comment below and share what moment moved you the most. Your words help us shape the next stories and keep this channel alive. And if you believe, like Elias, that family is chosen, and like Harper, that love can begin, even when we feel unworthy, tap the like button so more people can find this story. Make sure to subscribe and turn on the little bell so you never miss the next chapter, because tomorrow's story is something truly special and you do not want to miss it. Come back here anytime your heart needs comfort, a smile, or a reminder that love always has a way of finding those who believe.